Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Metabolic podcast. Now, today's episode, I have returning guest Casey Ryan Ruff from Boundless Body Radio on the show, and we are talking all things exercise. Whether you're a beginner or a pro, Casey's going to give us the lowdown on how to incorporate exercise into your daily routine for optimum health. Thank you, guys, and enjoy this episode.
Well, hi, Casey. Thank you so much for coming back on the Meat Medic podcast. Always an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Man, it's such an honor to be here. I love chatting with you. We've had a lot of really great conversations. And now I love that we've done two back-to-back recordings, which you have to wake up very, very early for. So I appreciate that. I hope you're well caffeinated.
I did have had a coffee this morning. I do occasionally drink coffee, absolutely. And I apologize, it was slightly late onto your interview this morning because my alarm didn't go off. But I was worried because actually this time last year we did another interview and I was actually a bit unwell for that. If you recall, my voice was really croaky. I actually have been unwell with flu or something earlier in the week. And I was like, oh my God, like again, like I'm gonna miss Casey's interview. It's gonna be horrible. I was like, I can't do this to him again. I'm coughing a tiny bit. But anyway, let's move on. What I really want to talk to you today about, Casey, is exercise, if we can. And we can branch off a little bit if you want to, of course. But I really want to talk about exercise because this is a problem I see people, a lot of my patients having, a lot of people that listen to the podcast, you know, they kind of have this idea that everything's about exercise. And if they can't exercise, well, actually, there's no point doing anything. Or they find reasons kind of not to exercise. I'm too busy. I don't have time. I don't have any equipment. You know, I'm too overweight to exercise, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And I think exercise is quite important for people. So I want to talk about that if we can today.
I would love to. It's something I really love to talk about and address. And I find that pretty much just like any other industry out there, especially if you're familiar with like the nutritional world, there's a lot of players out there that are using bad information to gain money. And certainly the same is true in the world of exercise. And, you know, most of us have social media. We follow certain people and they look like they're ready to do bodybuilding shows at any given time. And they don't realize, first of all, what goes into that. Second of all, you know, what has been enhanced chemically or in the photograph and the lighting and all this stuff. And we just think of it as this big, just difficult thing to approach, and everybody's intimidated by it, and so people don't do it. And you're right, there's tons of benefits, not least like mental benefits. And so I think it's a really important topic to touch. So I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, in the kind of the notes that I sent you, I think I mentioned Vred, I think in those notes, you know, on YouTube. I mean, this guy, like, he looks good. You mentioned people putting out kind of bad advice. You know, he looks good and he talks the talk, whatever. But I mean, some of his exercises are like dangerous. And I don't know if you know this guy, Vred.
I am not familiar with it, but
no? Okay. Yeah. You should have a look. Have a look at his YouTube channel. And I mean, there's so many like anti like Vred videos. People saying like these personal trainers and stuff, you know, saying like it's dangerous, like advice. Some of the exercises he's like telling people to do, like they're just gonna hurt themselves. It's really bad. And anyway, that's a whole another topic. I don't really want to talk about that today, but maybe that's a good, you know, jumping off point. A lot of people are worried that they're going to hurt themselves doing exercise. What are like some easy ways that people can start to get into exercise if they're basically doing nothing at the moment?
Yeah, this is a great place to jump in. And I would say like the saying that we kind of have is like, just because you can, like, should you? Like, I see some people doing some interesting things in the gym, and it's like, on the one hand, it's like impressive that they can do them, but on the other hand, it's like, first of all, what is that even doing? And second of all, what is the rate of return? What's your ROI versus risk of injury? You know what I mean? Like that has become, as my personal training career has evolved now, I've been doing this for over 17 years. The risk of injury has become, in my opinion, the number one most important thing to make sure that we are focusing on. If we hurt you in the gym, that is pretty much the worst thing that we could possibly do. And so I would say like it's also evolved the way that you know, I do my own training. So when I was first trained as a personal trainer, we learned what is called functional training, meaning we want to go into a gym and mimic exercises that look like your normal day or the activities that you do or the sports that you play. So if you're a soccer player, what do? You run around, you kick a ball, you maybe use other body parts to do that. You've got to be physical. And so we might have exercises that might look like soccer in the gym. Like maybe I'm hooking you up to a cable that's attached to your ankle and having you do like hip swings that looks like you're kicking. Different running things, or maybe you're doing direction changes. So you might be on hardwood and maybe I have you like jump down from a box and then run at different angles away from the box. And so I'll give you another example. Like I play ice hockey, and so I might do things in the gym where I'm like jumping back and forth like I'm skating, or I might swing a stick with a band on it like it's a hockey stick. And the longer I've gone in my career, the more I've appreciated that none of those things are actually the sport that you're going to be playing. The sport that you play is very contextual. Soccer is not played on hardwood. There's no boxes in soccer that's played on grass, and you kick a ball that weighs a certain amount, and you know it is, yeah, it's in that proper context. Same with ice hockey. Ice hockey is played on ice. It's not played in the gym. And so I've appreciated more over time, and especially being exposed to a book called Body by Science by Dr. Doug McGuff and John Little, the idea that you should use the gym to make yourself very strong. And let me expand that. I won't just say the gym, because a gym is not necessary. It's great if you have one, if you like it. Let's not say gym. Let's say strength training. Strength training should be designed to make your body very, very strong, and then do that so that then you can go and practice your sport in the context of what your sport actually is, and do drills or scrimmages or play games in that exact context. So where in the beginning of my career I had a lot of value in a wide array of different equipment and lots of different exercises, maybe medicine balls, maybe you're again like jumping side to side, or you're doing these complicated things. Dumbbells were always way better than machines because you have to stabilize, or TRX straps are way better than machines because you're using your core and all that stuff. I find a lot less value in that right now than I used to, and I think whatever can make you and your body very, very strong should absolutely be the priority over trying to do moves that mimic things that have, again, maybe not as much of a rate of return and an increase of injury. So people should know that injury prevention should be number one on their priority list when it comes to strength training.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. A lot of people are worried that they are going to injure themselves. And yeah, I mean, I've got not really a bodybuilding background or anything, but like everyone in my 20s, I was pumping iron at the gym and doing all the bro stuff. And I've got another daughter come to see me now. She's woken up. Hi, Miss Freya. And they watch TV, and people are going to be prone to injuries, if they've never really been at the gym or anything before. So, I mean, what you're saying there, I just want to go back a little bit. So do people need to go to a gym, or can they just start, doing stuff at home?
You can start doing stuff at home. I'm going to caveat that by saying, just like anything else, if this is the first time you are doing strength training, the first time you're learning about these kinds of things, there is a lot of value to hiring a professional to help teach you some of the things that you need. So hiring an experienced trainer, somebody you know and you trust. You don't need to do it forever. It can be very, very short term. In 1 or 2 sessions, I would argue you could learn quite a bit and start to do things on your own. So I would do that. And I would say that since the pandemic, trainers have gotten very, very creative in the way that we work with people. For example, I've got several people I work with that I've never met in real life, like people I train virtually through Zoom, and it works great. So that said, it's important to make sure your form is good. At the very least, like at least be like going to YouTube and maybe looking a few things up, as long as you're in the right place, is again another caveat. You could learn the wrong information by going to other websites. But yes, you do not need a gym. In fact, one of the pieces of equipment, of kit, that I have people buy if they're just looking to get started is literally a set of bands that you can get on Amazon for like $30. You can start with that. You can add little handles that go on top of them. With that, if you have even something like a mount that goes on a door that you can change the angle of different things, you can really do everything that you need from home quite easily. And again, I would say as long as you're doing the right exercises, you don't even need that much variation in doing tons and tons and tons of variety of different exercises. The core of what I teach people is really about 6 different lifts And if you get those down, that can be like the minimal effective dosage of everything that you need, nothing you don't need. Can you add to that? Absolutely. But that could be a really nice starting point, is just learning like 6 different lifts.
Yeah, so people don't need to go out, buy gym memberships. They don't need to, go out and buy loads of really expensive equipment or anything. You're saying they can just start at home, buy some bands, super cheap, a set of bands like Amazon, $30, you've said there. I mean, do people even need to go and buy bands? I mean, can they just start doing some body weight exercises at home, even to make it
Absolutely.
even easier and cheaper for them?
Absolutely. Yeah. The software program that I use to design my programs for my clients has different filters based on equipment. It's why I chose it during the pandemic, is because we had to start working with people and we didn't have the luxury of working with them in a gym with unlimited equipment. So we had to filter down to, okay, this person has a kettlebell and TRX straps and body weight. What can we do with this person? And there's even the ability to filter down not only to body weight, but even things like water bottles. Filling up a few jugs of water bottles can be quite effective to do lots of different things that costs next to nothing. You have all kinds of objects around you. You've got parks and places you can go and walk to. A lot of them already have fitness circuits set up, and you can do some really basic exercise if you just have some basic know-how and some creativity. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, in Australia here, we're pretty lucky actually. A lot of places, the parks have public equipment that you can actually work out in. It's quite funny. You see kids like climbing all over them, and it's so funny. Kids, you see those like reaction videos and stuff on TikTok and things of like, oh, like get first day going to the gym, and someone walks in, like looks around the gym, and it's all these people doing like insane stuff, like doing push-ups with a couch on their back with someone like standing on the couch or something like that, and all this crazy stuff. And you go to the exercise park, and the kids are like doing all this crazy stuff, like climbing all over the bench press, whatever. And it's hilarious. And like, but none of the adults are using the equipment. And like, they're just standing there looking at the kids messing around on it. And it's like, come on, like, just go and do some like pull-ups or something, and they're just like, nah, I'll just like stand here on my phone. It's pretty shocking. So yeah, here in Australia, we're pretty lucky actually, because we do have quite a lot of public equipment. And, here in Australia, things are actually pretty well maintained as well. Like back in the UK, it would all be just vandalized like 24/7. But here in Australia, we're actually pretty lucky with that. So yeah, I mean, even like just calisthenics, just body weight exercise is just getting the body moving. How are some ways that, people can make this even easier? Like what, like I don't like the word, but like the idiot's guide to like starting exercise for people, like just they've never exercised. Maybe they're very, very overweight. They're worried about hurting themselves. They don't want to go to the gym. They're embarrassed, or they just don't have the money. Like how can people just kind of start? Like, what is an effective way to just start this process?
Great question. That's a great question. I would have somebody start this process by doing something, doing anything, whatever level that somebody is at is totally fine. And I think people have heard this story before, but it actually works. I've seen this work where we would tell people, maybe when they first joined the gym, but they weren't motivated, maybe it came with their employment or whatever, and they didn't want to use the gym. We would just tell them, like, make a goal of swiping your card at the front desk 2 times a week. And I don't care whether you go upstairs or you just walk around the desk and get back in your car and leave. Get in the habit of at least doing something. And again, that's applied to a gym. And over time, when I was there, I saw people that would do that and they would just leave. And then over time, maybe they'd stop by the cafe and get a healthier lunch. And then over time, like, I'm here, maybe I'll go upstairs and walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes. And that evolves to be like a habit that sticks. So again, that's applied to a gym. If we're talking about people who do not want to belong to a gym, you could use that same principle to just say, like, maybe today I'm going to walk back to my mailbox. I already got the mail, but maybe I'm going to do a second one. Maybe I'm just going to go to the end of the street and back. I'm just going to make this a habit in whatever way that I can do this and just get started. For some people, maybe it's like sitting up and down out of a chair 5 times or whatever it is, whatever you feel like. The saying that I like to tell my clients is, we want it to be challenging but successful. What is going to push you? But you can also do it. Like, I don't want it to be not challenging, because you're not going to get too much out of that. But I also don't want it to be unsuccessful. Like, if you feel like a failure because you can't do something, that's not the appropriate level. Challenging, but successful. Find something there, establish a bit of a habit, as small as you think it is, that can transform over time. I'll give you one more example. When Fitbits and walking trackers were coming out and were very popular, we started selling them at the gym that I was working at. We started to do contests, and the more steps you got, the better you did in the contest, obviously. And so I learned at the time, one easy thing that I can do is just park at the furthest parking spot that I possibly can, and that gets me like an extra like 500 steps into any store that I ever go into. That was back in 2011. That's a very small change. I have not done a movement contest in that time yet. Guess where I still park to this day? Like, I park at the furthest spot. I don't fight anybody for parking spots. I get extra steps and more sunshine. I think it's faster anyway. That's just one example of like a small habit that you change. I'm just going to do this one little thing that over time you might forget to stop doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're talking about there is friction, maybe. So when I'm talking to people about like addictions and good bad behaviors, quote unquote, I talk to them about friction and maybe how to reduce friction for those behaviors that we want to do. So yeah, like make it kind of easy on yourself. Don't put too much pressure. Don't make it too difficult as well. And then you're more likely to kind of do those kind of quote unquote, good behaviors. What are some other ways that people can start to just develop? So let's say that they've already started, like an exercise program. But let's just say that, with the pandemic and cost of living crisis, I'm sure it's probably the same over in the States as it is here. A lot of people that, they can't afford gym memberships. They think maybe personal trainers are an expense that they want to pay, but maybe they just can't afford, to stretch for that. Like, how far can people kind of go just at home, like in front of their own TV?
They can go very, very far. And if you're talking about a lack of money, it just means that there's going to be an increase in something like a time resource. So for example, if you want to hire me for a 30-minute session, I will teach you in 30 minutes lots of different things that you don't have to go out and learn, but you're going to lose money when you do that. If you can't afford it, that's totally fine. It just probably will require a little bit more time on your end to find the right information and learn how to do form on certain things. I would argue that the best bang for the buck as far as time goes is strength training. And the 6 exercises that I would really promote and tell people to try to learn would be a combination of pushing movements and pulling movements that use multiple joints. And so, for example, if I'm standing, I'm holding something in front of me and I'm pulling it towards me, that is a horizontal pull in the upper body called a row. If I do the opposite and push something away from me, that's a horizontal push. So that's like a chest press. Overhead, you can push something overhead, and that's a shoulder press. You can pull something down, and that's a pull down. In the lower body, you can push against the ground. So that might be a squat where you're bending your knees, dropping your butt down, and going back up. You can also pull something off the ground like a deadlift where you're having a slight bend in the knees, but hinging from the hips. So with those 6 exercises, you're perfectly balanced between pushing and pulling. You're working primarily the central part of the body where we find the biggest muscle groups. You're working multiple joints all at the same time. So that is the best bang for the buck for time. And a really simple way that I would have somebody do that is to find either some really inexpensive equipment like some bands or body weight ways to do this, where you can do this at home for free. And if you just did those 6 exercises, even just one set, but you did them very, very slowly until you got to the point that you felt like it was very, very challenging. Maybe you get a little shaky, maybe you get a little anxious. You're building up fatigue in the muscles and it gets to be very challenging. You can stop right there and then just go through those 6 different exercises. That might only take you 10 to 15 minutes. That might be all you need to do in a week to get really, really, really good results. And again, you could add to that if you wanted to, but that would be a very simple way that somebody could start to incorporate those things. And even if they didn't have the time to do all 6 of them every single day, maybe they do what I did today at the gym. Today, I went and trained somebody at a facility where they like to be. And so I go there and we finished my client's workout and he left. And I just wanted to do one thing. So I went and sat on one machine in that style. I just pulled until I didn't really want to, and then I stopped, and that was done. And that was it. That's my exercise for the day. It took like 90 seconds. Somebody could do that at home very, very easily. Again, with bands or hanging on a bar or whatever, you can figure it out for sure.
Yeah, I think that's very, very good advice there. I mean, I went to the park, yesterday with my kids gymnastics, and they wanted to play in the park, afterwards. And yeah, they're just like a horizontal bar, and I can't really do pull-ups right now at the moment because I've got a problem with my elbow, but I can do just like kind of like a lean, so like a 45 degree, and then just kind of pull myself up. And yeah, I just did it kind of slowly, just like 10 just angled pull-ups, really slow. It's putting more on my back, on my lat, less on my my arms. And listening to my own body, okay, like, yeah, that's kind of hurting. Okay, change the angle, whatever, like actually listening to that feedback to prevent injury, as you're saying. But it was so easy. Just, yeah, like there's just a bar there, like just use it, do like 10 kind of angled pull-ups, have a bit of a 30-second break, do another 10. And I'm like, yeah, okay, like that's my exercise for the day, like I usually do a bit more than that, but I was, yeah, a bit time poor yesterday, as you said today. Yeah, I don't think you need to do huge amounts of exercise all the time. What are some ways that people can avoid or reduce the risk of injury? Speaking of injuries, because again, this is something that I see with my patients. A lot of them are, you know, people are quite overweight. They've never really been to the gym before. They don't know like lifting technique. Like, what are some simple ways that people can things that people can do to reduce the risk of actually injuring themselves?
Yep, great question. So the first thing I will say is something we've already mentioned, which is tempo. I would want your tempo to be very, very slow, meaning you're moving the weight forward and backward in a very slow and controlled way. Um, it is uncomfortable, but moving slow, it's nearly impossible to hurt yourself. You can control it the whole time, which is fine. So that would be one thing. The second thing is this is where I put a lot of value into things like machines, where the path of where the weight is going is more controlled. If you prefer to go to a facility, if they have those, I think those are great. They will help you if you move a weight slowly. It's nearly impossible to get hurt there, especially if you're not like loading tons and tons of weight on them. If you're working out at home or you don't want to go into a facility, again, it's more about like learning how to do some of these things and just learning like what the proper range of motion is. I would have somebody really pay attention to how their body is feeling when they're doing something. People will tell me oftentimes like, oh man, this exercise really hurts, and I'll stop them and say like, wait, okay, does it hurt? Or is this uncomfortable? Is it hurting you? Is it pain? Or is there a burning uncomfortable sensation? Because if it's uncomfortable, I'm okay with that and I'm going to make you keep going. If it hurts, we stop. There are so many different things that you can do with your body and ways that you can move. There is no reason to try to force an exercise when you feel physical pain. So a deadlift would be a good example of that. Some days I show up and I do a deadlift and I feel great. My back feels great and strong and there's no problem. And other days, for whatever reason, maybe my back doesn't feel so great. It feels a little tweaky. And I know it as soon as I step up, and that's it. That's done. I'm not even going to mess with it if I feel like I'm going to get hurt in any way. So you need to be really aware of that kind of thing. But using the equipment at a slow tempo, whatever you have, or even body weight stuff like you described, a 45-degree kind of inverted row, moving slowly is and paying attention for pain would be the best things I would recommend.
Yeah, I think all very, very good advice there. Where does nutrition come into this? Because I know you're obviously big on nutrition, and we spoke about this, of course, before on the channel's a lot about nutrition. Of course, we spoke about nutrition before. Where does nutrition kind of come into, say, recovery, injury, and preventing injury?
Yeah, this is where I think removing inflammatory foods from the diet will make a massive difference for most people. Um, so in the last decade or so, I've gotten myself into, learning that fat could be something that somebody could incorporate in their diet, so it wouldn't necessarily kill them of a heart attack. That eventually led me to low carbohydrate diets, which led me to keto diets, which led me to more animal-based and carnivore diets. And I played with all of those for sure. And I do notice that my recovery is far, faster when I'm eating a more kind of in the realm of a carnivore diet or animal based, however you want to call it. When I am not eating processed foods, I feel awesome. I used to, there's a move in hockey when you're trying to poke the puck away from somebody else who has it. So it's called a poke check, where you're just trying to like suddenly like stick your hockey stick out. And it would happen once a year where my shoulder would just, I would do it and something would tweak in my shoulder. And for a few weeks, it would just like kill my shoulder. And maybe it's just a coincidence, but that has not happened to me since, going the last 5 years on a primarily animal-based diet. I've not had that happen. And I do notice that like I can really, really push myself in the gym quite hard and think like, okay, I'm going to be pretty dead for the next few days. You wake up the next day and you're like, oh, like I feel okay. Like don't need to do that again for several days, but I feel okay if I had to. And I would say I notice that with a lot of my clients. The aches and pains tend to kind of go away and the recovery tends to speed up, like we said. So, regardless of how strict somebody wants to be, if they're just addressing ultra processed food, sugar, wheat, seed oils, that kind of thing, if you're at least addressing that, you should see great improvement in all of those things.
Yeah, by addressing, of course, you mean reducing and removing, of course. Yeah. Where do you think like protein sits in that equation?
Highly, very highly. I think everybody needs to make protein a priority. And I think when people think they're eating a high protein diet, they're actually maybe not even close to the amount of protein that they need. I mean, we can just say right off the bat, like the recommendations for protein intake are absolutely ridiculous. I hope everybody listening to this already knows that, like, whatever they recommend, like 60 grams of plant-based protein a day or whatever, like
Yeah,
that's
it's way
not
too low. It's way
way
too
too
low.
low. Way too low. And again, just keeping in mind, if you are eating plant-based proteins, I think there's some evidence that can help contribute. And certainly if you are eating a plant-based diet, get as much protein as you possibly can. It's going to be really challenging for you if you can eat the more animal-based, which is what I would assume for the listeners of your show. I really like people to really aim for about 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal weight per day. In kilograms, that's 2.2. So you might be able to half that and be in the ballpark. I don't think it needs to be precise. I think weight loss and things like intermittent fasting change that equation a little bit. As your body is entering, autophagy, in intermittent fasting, you may not need nearly as many calories or as much protein as your body's recycling protein, but that should still be something you focus on. We always talk about the importance of, muscle mass, and not to say that everybody needs to be a huge bodybuilder, but we do want to protect our muscle as much as possible, especially as we age. We want to defend that. And so that kind of process is, it is the exercise. It is pushing yourself to a certain level of muscular fatigue. It should be quite intense as you're getting more and more used to that feeling over time. You don't need to do that from the beginning, but should be challenging. The next part of that to me is you got to be taking in the building blocks of muscle. So that's how your body is repairing itself and getting those amino acids. I really like to see a high amount of animal protein intake for the person. And then the third step in that process is really to make sure you are also resting. You shouldn't be doing this on a daily basis. Your load needs to be balanced throughout a week or a month or however you look at it, but making sure you're giving yourself plenty of recovery.
Yeah, I mean, I think there may be some vegetarians and vegans listening to the podcast. I'm not 100% sure, but I do have some vegetarian and vegan patients, and we agree to disagree slightly. But I work within their frameworks as best I can, and we're civil and we agree on some points. We're all just trying to improve health. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the recommendations for protein intake are just woefully insufficient. I mean, I think here in Australia, they're a little bit better. I think they now recommend about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is better. Ideal body weight. It's still really low. It's still really, really low. How do people kind of work out their ideal body weight? Because this is also some confusion I see with people. Is what is my ideal body weight, and how do they work that out?
That's a great question, and I don't think I would have like an objective answer for you. And really, we're not talking about precision as far as like the exact grams of protein. I think the more you pay attention to your body and your satiety cues, your body will really tell you when it's that last bite of meat and you just can hardly chew it anymore. You probably have gotten enough. Some people can maybe go off of like a BMI, or maybe you have a time in your life where you weighed a certain amount and you want to get, maybe close to that. I think a lot of people, that number is a lot lower than where they actually do feel optimal. So exactly determining what ideal weight is can be challenging. I think it can be a little bit helpful if you have somewhat of a, somewhat reliable way of measuring body fat, muscle mass. So you can say like, okay, I weigh 180 pounds. I'm 20% body fat. I would really like to be about 15% body fat. You can do the math on that and say like, okay, that means my body weight would probably be around 170, 171 if I lose that amount of body fat, or maybe a little bit lower. But anyway, somewhere in that ballpark. And just again, just kind of ballpark it. Be close to that amount. Pay attention to your hunger and satiety cues, and do the best you can.
Yeah. I mean, the formula that I use for people, which I think actually works out really actually surprisingly well for male, female, kids, elderly, whatever kind of scenario, is using height, actually. So 1 gram of protein per centimeter of body height per day, which I think actually works out surprisingly well. I mean, to use your example there, like 180 pounds, I mean, with 20% body fat, I mean, that person's probably going to be like 6 foot tall. I mean, what about 180 centimeters? That would be 180 grams
That's a great way to do
a
it.
day. I
Love it.
I think it's so simple, and it's people. Oh yeah, I get that. And there's no messing around with like what's my body fat percentage and BMI, all that kind of stuff. And that's what I've found works actually very, very well for people. It's very much in that ballpark. But I think when you again think about that, the kind of the government recommendations are so low for protein intake that it's scary how low they are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really bad, the information we're getting. And the problem is people, like, those are the sites that people find. Like one that I looked at not too long ago, a few months ago, I just typed in protein recommendations. It sent me to the Livestrong site, and it was saying like, yeah, you should really target about 60 grams of protein a day as like your baseline. You want to get about that, and good sources of protein are like almonds and
So
like
low.
pea protein. It's just not. Yeah, no wonder people are suffering with bone density and sarcopenia, and like the fall that the elderly person has that puts them in the hospital where they never return. That's happening younger and younger to people, because people don't realize
Yeah.
that like the protein intake, the strength training, all those things are not just for bodybuilders and for giant muscles. They are for maintaining strength and bone density and overall health. And so yeah, regardless of how somebody gets protein, I just think you really, really, really need to prioritize it probably a little bit more than you think you are doing currently.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. I mean, if the question, is how much protein should I eat? My answer is always more.
More. Yeah,
Basically,
more.
how much exercise should I do? Basically, pretty much more. I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Pretty much everybody from birth to death should be, exercising. Babies, obviously, yeah, they're not sitting there lifting weights or anything. No, but like pretty much everyone from birth to death should be exercising.
That's what they're doing at the playgrounds. They're strength training. It's no different. What you're seeing your kids do at the playground. That's strength training at a young age. That's great.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, I saw both my daughters the other day, 8 and 6. And I mean, their like upper body strength is just, it puts me absolutely to shame. They're just like climbing, doing like across the bar at the top. And it's got all these, it's like a rope bridge. And so there's all these ropes coming down off it. And they're just holding onto the bar. I mean, like literally the bar is like, I probably couldn't put my hand, even 2 hands, like all the way around the bar. So they're literally almost hanging on with like fingertips. And then they're just like literally navigating, like just flipping like 180, like navigating around all these ropes and stuff coming off this bar. And like they're just basically going backwards and forwards without even coming off it, like, probably doing 5 meters. I'm like, what the hell? Like, it's like they're so strong. It's crazy.
So impressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to see like good form, these kids can like sit in a deep squat with flat feet for like ever. And
Yeah.
like they know they hate shoes. Their shoes are always pitched to the sides. They're always barefoot.
So
Their little feet can just grab everything. Their hands, like, yeah, they have a lot to teach us about how to move for sure.
They certainly do. I think they have a lot to teach us about nutrition as well. I mean, we didn't really get into that much today, but we can do another episode on that, of course. I'm conscious of time. And is there anything else that you want to kind of say, like a key summary, of course, and how can people find you if they're interested in following your stuff? Of course, your amazing Boundless Body Radio podcast, which I know I've guested on now twice, but by the time this episode comes out.
Well, yeah, thank you. And I've heard a recent episode of yours where you gave us a very nice compliment in the episode we did with Ben Bickman. So I really do appreciate that. And it was an honor to host you. Yeah, I mean, final piece of advice, I would just say, just keep it simple. Find ways to move. Movement is so important for us. We talk primarily about the physical benefits, and we're now just learning about how important it is mentally for us to move. And so whatever that is for you, try to do more of it. In a safe fashion. If you can do strength training, that's phenomenal. As far as where to find us, the best place is our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. One of the very first things you'll see there is a little button that says book now. You can click on that to book a free consultation if you have questions about this stuff. If you want to chat about a strength training program, we don't charge to chat with you for 30 minutes, and we will answer a ton of your questions and at least get you pointed in the right direction, or at least give you some resources that you can start with. Whether or not you want to continue and do something with us, we can talk about that as well, but we'll get you at least in the right direction. That's always free. So again, the website is myboundlessbody.com.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure I put all of those in the show notes, of course. I think it's definitely time to go. My kids are getting a little bit ratty in the background. They need nappy changes, and now my daughter's crying. So thank you so much.